Well, good morning, everyone. Hopefully you're having a little sunshine on this April morning. Thank you for joining Greenwald's Coffee Break. I hope you have your coffee, tea, or water handy for this quick sharing of research results and discussions. I'm Lisa Greenwald, CEO of Greenwald Research. These coffee breaks are a little different than your average webinar. We aim to keep them casual and quick. We do hope that if you have questions, feel free to turn your mic on, turn your camera on, jump in and join us in the discussion. We'll present some research findings as thought starters and save a little time at the end for questions as well. We are recording. That recording will be made available on Greenwald's website sometime early next week. I am joined today by Eric Sondergeld. Eric is a senior researcher and strategic thought leader. Eric joined Greenwald just 2 weeks ago. He was most recently a corporate vice president and director at LIMRA, where he led the technology and strategic research teams. He's also led LIMRA's annuity, retirement, distribution, and international research programs. So needless to say, Greenwald is really pleased to have him on the team. And we are looking forward to hearing his take this morning on some of our research findings around emergency savings and debt. Eric, take it away.
And he's very happy to be on the team as well. So good morning, everybody. I'm going to share my screen and hopefully I'll do this correctly. Okay, so yes, today I'll be presenting some information on, I think, two related topics that a lot of people struggle with, which is having emergency savings in case of an unexpected expense and debt, and where workplace solutions might play a role in helping people manage these things. So most of us pay for most of our expenses out of our current income, right? And either have an implicit or explicit budget to manage them. But when we're faced with an unexpected expense, we essentially have three options. We can pay for it today out of current income. We can pay for it yesterday using yesterday's income because we've saved in some fashion to be able to pay for that thing today. Or we can pay for it tomorrow by going into debt. Now, there are also some people who have none of these options. So in today's coffee break, I'll be sharing recent research that sheds light on how consumers navigate the challenges of emergency savings and debt, and their perspectives on the role their employers might play in helping manage them. And I'll be sharing results from two research studies. The first is the 21 workplace wellness survey that we did with eBri last summer. We surveyed full and part-time workers aged 21 to 64. We also I'm also pulling some research from the Great Resignation study, which we did just this past January, with a slightly older group of workers from age 25 to 74 instead of 21 to 64. So jumping right in, over half struggle to manage multiple financial priorities. And those with incomes less than $35,000, and especially those that say they have a major debt problem, are much more likely to struggle. When asked to select their top 3 financial priorities, 4 of the top 5 relate to emergency savings or debt. Tied for first are related, since if someone is struggling to pay their monthly bills, they may need to tap into any existing savings or go into debt when they can't make ends meet. Student loan debt appears to be a lesser issue, and even among younger respondents aged 21 to 34, just 15% mentioned student debt as a top 3 financial priority. I suppose this is encouraging given all the attention student debt gets in the media. These two studies are point-in-time assessments, one from last summer and the other from early this year. In the latter, we asked them how things may have changed over the past year, essentially during 2021. The two biggest declines had to do with their ability to save for unexpected expenses and for retirement. Also declining was their ability to pay bills. While these things improved for many, they declined for even more. This chart emphasizes the range of financial outcomes of the pandemic. And I think this chart is a great demonstration of just how differently the pandemic affected different people. For many, the pandemic resulted in lower expenses as people didn't have to commute, may not have gone on vacation or dined out as much, et cetera, compared to pre-pandemic. The result is they were able to save more as their expenses declined. On the other hand, for many, the pandemic meant unemployment or reduced hours and other challenges leading to financial hardship. This slide shows that dichotomy. For example, while 19% increased emergency savings as a result of COVID-19, 24% used some or all of it, and 12% reduced such savings. Similarly, 18% took on more debt, while just 16% paid down debt. Now, focusing just on emergency savings for a moment. Many studies have shown that a large percentage of Americans would have difficulty managing even a modest financial shock. Our research is no different in that respect. Experts often recommend that people maintain at least 6 months worth of income as emergency savings. But if 4 in 10 people couldn't come up with $5,000, which is well below 6 months of most people's incomes, then the number who have saved enough for the suggested 6 months is likely much lower. Of concern is that even though some feel they manage through an unexpected expense, fully half assume they can use their retirement savings plan as an emergency account too. Granted, these funds can be accessed, but at the expense of reducing their ultimate retirement savings. This result is consistent with the theme that for many people, their money needs to serve many purposes. Yes, financial experts recommend that people separately save for retirement, for emergencies, for healthcare costs through HSAs, and even for saving for other things like buying a home or a vacation fund, et cetera. For many, this is simply a luxury. We find a similar theme as people enter retirement having undersaved. They don't have the luxury of time or starting over and must make do with what they have while hoping for the best, since their money needs to simultaneously cover their expenses and be available for the many what ifs that retirement brings. For people in this category, the opportunity for the industry is to help them improve their situation without necessarily aiming for complete financial security. The good news is that even though many see their retirement plan as their single source of emergency savings, relatively few have taken advantage of that option. However, the chart on the right shows that 1 in 4 would tap their retirement plan for an unexpected expense of just $500, and 1 in 3 for an expense of $5,000. And these numbers grew significantly from 2020 to last year. Now a bit on consumer debt. 2 in 3 workers describe themselves as having a debt problem. Other than a slight increase in the percentage saying their debt is a major problem, this is unchanged from the prior year. 3 in 4 workers have debt that isn't a mortgage. That's pretty significant. And fully half have more than $25,000 in non-mortgage debt. The percentage with a high level of non-mortgage debt is relatively similar, whether they have a major problem with student loan debt, medical debt, or credit card debt. While the spiraling cost of higher education and associated student debt have been in the headlines for years, workers are more likely to have credit card debt or health-related debt that they say is a problem. Also, student loan debt is typically held by younger workers. Following a similar pattern of those who have a major debt problem, 86% have credit card debt, 78 have medical debt, and 67 have student loan debt. But not all credit is created equal. For example, if you take out a mortgage to purchase a home, you benefit from that home while you live in it. When you have a student loan, you hopefully your career is benefiting from the education that loan helped pay for. However, if you have credit card debt or medical debt, the ongoing benefit of that debt is less obvious. And finally, what's the role of the employer in all of this? So there is certainly interest in receiving education from employers on a variety of financial topics, including how to build emergency savings, reduce debt, or manage student debt, and on how HSAs work and how much workers should contribute to them. A significant percentage of workers say their employers offer a variety of programs, such as incentives to encourage non-retirement savings, hardship assistance, and even emergency savings programs. I'm not sure I believe the 23% of workers that have access to an emergency savings program through work, unless those saying so are considering their retirement plan such an option. Earlier, I showed that 54% of workers see their retirement plan savings as the only significant source of emergency savings. That jumps to 71% for those saying their employer offers such an emergency savings fund. This suggests that many consider them one and the same. That said, of those that claim their employer offers an emergency savings fund, more than half have taken advantage of the program, and 2/3 of those who don't have access to one would like their employer to offer one. And let's imagine that all their employers added this option and all those interested actually use it. Then in theory, 65% of workers would have access to an emergency savings program through work. Those are big ifs, but combined, they do suggest high demand. Eight in 10 workers are interested in having an emergency savings account through work, and half are interested. These figures are similar to those on the last slide. The difference here is that we added that the employer would contribute something as part of that program. Similarly, on the student debt side, 38% of workers would be extremely or very interested in a student debt paydown plan. And that doubles to 75% for those saying they have a major student debt problem. As in the previous slide, here we're assuming the employer would contribute in some way. And finally, how might benefits serve as a motivator for employees to stay or leave? And this question asked workers what benefits would motivate them to stay with their current employer or move to another one. More than half of workers would be at least somewhat motivated by each of 3/4 of the benefits on this list. Among them are 2/3 that would value an emergency savings program. Further down the list is help with student loan repayment. Not asked on these surveys is whether workers would want their employers to help them with non-mortgage, non-student debt, such as credit card or health-related debt. Unlike a mortgage or student loan, as I mentioned, where there is pride of accomplishment, such as buying a house or earning a degree, there is likely more shame than pride among those with debt. And they probably don't talk about it a lot at work and may not want to expose that to their employer. While solving a debt problem may be more akin to digging yourself out of a hole, saving, whether for emergencies or retirement, is more aspirational as you're building towards something. And that concludes the formal remarks from these two studies. And at this point, I'd love to open it up for questions, comments, discussion.
Eric, well, hopefully others think of comments and questions. I'll throw one out there. Call it your hazing. I'll put you on the spot. There was a comment, and I'm sure reaction of surprise to see student loan debt so low on some of these lists, given the great amount of attention it gets. So with your fresh eyes on this data, I'm wondering what your takeaway is on that and why so much attention is paid to student loan debt while our research puts it lower on the list.
So, well, student loan debt is actually high in terms of, it is a major problem for a lot of people, right? But on the other hand, they don't necessarily see their employer as the place where they want to get that solved. I also think people have probably incorporated paying for the student loan debt into their regular expenses, more so than perhaps when they suddenly take on debt for something else that came up, right? So I'm guessing that their student loan payment has been incorporated into their regular expenses, more so than, if you have a credit card balance, there's no specific amount you're paying each month for that. And a lot of people may just pay the interest and let that continue to grow. So I think people think differently about student loan debt than they do with the other types of debt.
One other factor I think we ought to consider is student loan debt has been suspended for a couple of years, and that reduces the impact.
Right. But there's still that unknown, right? It hasn't been completely forgiven.
That's right. It may become very important once payments resume.
Right. Who else wants to put me on the spot? Let's go.
Eric, I will again. How about those emergency savings options at work? You and I, as we prepared this, talked briefly about, payroll deduction for emergency savings being somewhat low-hanging fruit. And it's something we've been talking about as a need in the industry for a long time. What solutions do you see out there? Why don't you think they're being adopted more widely?
That's a great question. So, and I think both of us were surprised by that 23% of workers that say they have such a feature at work. But I think some of the data suggests a chunk of that 23 is their retirement plan or 401k, the DC plan at work. There are companies who have options available. These are providers of emergency savings plans that they're trying to make available to, as an employee benefit. There are some startups, and there are some very, long existing financial firms offering these features. So it's gonna come down to the take-up rate. There's also the question of whether the emergency savings option should be separate from the retirement plan or another option within it, because both flavors do exist. There are some strict rules that have to apply when it's the latter, because you can't switch money back and forth between your tax-deferred retirement savings and the emergency savings, which won't be pre-tax, and it won't be tax-deferred, right? And it's accessible. So I think there are people in different camps whether or not that money should be completely outside of the retirement plan or not. But I think it's going to come down to more organizations getting these options in front of employers to consider. There's certainly enough demand for it. One data source I looked for to just see how prevalent these was the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They're not tracking this yet. And if the true number were 23, I'm guessing they would. So hopefully they'll start tracking this, and we can start seeing progress.
So then I guess a question to our viewers, our visitors. I mean, has anyone seen any intriguing or successful examples of workplace emergency savings plans? Well, there was one I will throw out there that I encountered about a year ago. It's called the Sunny Day Fund. They're actually based here in the greater DC area. But their program is through payroll deduction. And if the employer is so inclined to incentivize emergency savings, the employer subsidizes a higher interest rate on those savings. So just one I've been keeping my eye on, wondering if anyone else has seen some other possible solutions.
And there are retail solutions as well. But I think the silence you're hearing from the group, demonstrates that these are not prominent yet, even though there's a lot of interest in it. And there are some companies that will tell workers when they offer these programs that they should really make sure they have something set aside for emergencies before they start to contribute to the retirement plan.
Was someone else going to jump in? I thought I heard a voice.
Yeah, Lisa, it's Nevin.
Hey, Nevin.
Hey, and thanks, Eric. This is it's good to have you all. Have you on the team. You all know they're working on Capitol Hill on trying to, because I think the point is this is all rather ad hoc right now. And honestly, from my standpoint, it starts with the definition of what do you mean by emergency savings? Because on the one hand, I think the touchstone that is used in a lot of parlance is that old $400 figure from the, was it Federal Reserve report back? I mean, I think they ask the question every year in one of the federal government surveys anyway. But there are bills on the Hill right now, one trying to institute $1,000 emergency savings sort of sidecar, if you will, to people's retirement savings. There's another suggestion being bandied about, I think, by the Aspen Institute to do $5,000. And that's being looked at, and they're talking about that. So I suspect that, realizing that it's all rather ad hoc right now, but this is it's a very hot topic. People are talking about it. People in Congress are looking for a way to provide some structure to it. And I think a little bit to what Eric was saying earlier, I think there is an interest in having it tied in some form or fashion with the existing retirement savings plan, since most people seem to be viewing that as an emergency savings account anyway. So
I guess, Nevin, then my question back to you and the group is that a good thing? Do we want people viewing the retirement account as the emergency savings, or is it better off as something completely separate?
So,
Well,
hey, Lisa, it's Barbara Rail. We've actually spent over at AIG, and Eric, it's great to see you over at Greenwald now. I don't know if you remember me working with you years and years ago when I was still at Lincoln Financial, but we spent a lot of time looking at the emergency savings. And I think the bills could actually, that are in Congress now, could complement each other, because you're thinking about savings in two ways. There's the true, like, the refrigerator broke and I need to have it repaired, emergency savings. And then there's like, do I have 6 months of income saved, right? And I think that sidecar account could serve for option B, but maybe, for folks that aren't quite there yet, that option A, the Langford bill, could actually be of value, because at least then it maybe gets people saving. And that's the way we think about it here at AIG, is if people aren't saving for retirement now because they can't access the money, then give them a way to access the money so they will start saving. And that's why we like it being part of the retirement plan, but at a limited amount. But for higher savings values, it really does need to be a sidecar. I don't know what others think about that.
I think Talisa, your question, we could debate which option is better, right? And I think, given the sentiment of your question, that maybe the ideal option is to have them separate. But if the goal is to help people save more, and doing so within the retirement plan is a way that accomplishes that, then that's what we want to do, right? So whatever thing helps get people to save more for emergencies, while hopefully still retaining the ability to save for retirement, is going to be the best option.
well, I think a little bit to your point, Eric, the behavioral finance guys and ladies are going to tell you that the separate account is the way to go, that's the way it, quote, should be done. I think the reality, though, is I don't think real people, I mean, that's a great academic answer, but I don't think real people operate that way. And I think for most people, particularly more vulnerable populations, which I'm assuming we're mostly worried about, if you give them a separate bucket, they're going to feel like they have to make a choice. They're either going to put it in for emergency savings, or they're going to save for retirement. I think there will be a great hesitancy to think they can afford to do both. So we don't want to put them in that situation. I think that's some of the logic behind the bills that are going around in Congress now, particularly the Langford bill, the sort of acknowledgement that we can bring those two things together and achieve both goals. And I think the employer community, I mean, a little surprised at this. I think the employer community, at least through our Plan Sponsor Council of America membership, seems to be supportive of that. And I would have told you 10 years ago that employers would have said, I don't want to get involved in that. But I think we're all realizing, particularly in COVID, that emergencies may actually come up. that we don't anticipate.
I think those are all really good points, and thank you for chiming in. We are at time and appreciate you all joining us this morning. Like I said, the coffee breaks recorded and will be made available on Greenwald's site. The obvious plugs are also that eBreeze and Greenwald's Workplace Wellness Survey for 2023 will be kicking off next month if anyone is interested in sponsoring that research. And if you have any questions, Eric and I remain available to you, as does the rest of the Greenwald team.